Okay. So I have 8:36 a.m. I'd like to call to order the October 11th, 2023 meeting of the Arkansas State Board of Pharmacy. We'll start with our roll call. Dr. Rodney Richmond. Here. Dr. Lynn Krause. Dr. Lenore Newsom.
Here.
Dr. Debbie Mack.
Here.
Dr. Clint Boone.
Here.
Mr. Harold Simpson. Dr. Beth Ann Davenport.
Here.
We have 2 members absent, but we have a quorum. First item on the agenda is Casey Williams, PD 08798, and I'll turn it over to our hearing officer.
Casey Williams.
Darren O'Quinn from Little Rock. We are. We have.
I'm Ashley Vales, General Counsel for the Arkansas Board of Pharmacy.
Party attorney or board member needs to take a break or leave the room, advise me, and we'll take a break in the hearing. So I hit it a while ago, it just didn't come on. Who are going to be the witnesses here today?
I'm going to call Dr. Brenda McCready and possibly Dr. Williams as well.
Yes, we have Dr. Williams and well as Dr. Shaver here is a character witness, and then there's 2 character letters in the file.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and swear everybody in at once. So if all of our witnesses can raise their hand, I'll go ahead and swear you in. Okay. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Let the record reflect all 3 witnesses that have been identified have now been sworn in. Are there any preliminary matters need to be addressed before we begin?
Yes, I would like to move to admit exhibits 1 through 28 in this matter on behalf of the Board of Pharmacy, and they are in the tablets of the board members.
Council, have you seen this?
No
back?
objections.
Okay, no objection. Okay, then they shall be admitted.
I have an additional motion that the board take notice of all pharmacy laws as well as pharmacy rules.
So noted. Council.
I'll go ahead and just move as a housekeeping matter to admit our exhibits 1 through 4 that are also in the board's electronic tablet.
Okay.
No objection.
They shall be admitted. Any other issues need to be addressed before we begin? Okay, council opening statement.
Members of the board, Dr. Williams is present here today. We're seeking disciplinary action against him. He was working as a pharmacist at ExpressRx, and he submitted fictitious prescriptions for 4 different patients for Mounjaro prescriptions, quantities of 3 boxes each for each patient. So 12 boxes of Mounjaro that were unaccounted for that the patients never received, with the exception of 1 who received partial. And it's the staff's position that he was looking for patients that would go unnoticed so he could charge insurance for this. The value of this is up to $2,000. each, and Dr. Williams appeared in front of the committee, informal committee, the last couple of months. At the close of that hearing, the board asked him to submit a voluntary surrender of his license, which he did. So that brings us here, today.
Yes, so Dr. Williams is not here to deny that he made a series of poor decisions and mistakes that have landed him here today. He did go before the informal committee and he voluntarily surrendered his license after that hearing in anticipation of this hearing today. Since that time, he has not been working as a pharmacist, but he has gone and taken an intensive ethics and pharmacy course that he can describe, that it's in your notebook as exhibits 1 and 2. And he's also engaged in counseling with a psychiatrist, PhD psychologist. I'm sorry. So he's got those things that he's trying to do to understand why he made such a poor decision, because I think you'll find that this was out of his character. He'll go through each of the 4 patients and explain what he did and why he made a poor decision for those patients. He does have Dr. Shaver here today. He's a practicing pharmacist of about 55 years that has known him and is going to vouch for his character, but for this poor judgment that he used. And then he's got 2 other character references, but we're not here to say he didn't do anything wrong. He did.
Thank you, counsel.
In light of that, I'm just asked to call Dr. Williams the witness.
You're going to call him first?
Mhm.
Or, okay.
Dr. Williams, let's go through, and I think you have the exhibits there in front of you. And again, as we did in the informal hearing, we're not going to refer to the patients by name. So let's look at allegation number 2. On April 10th, you submitted a prescription for a 90-day supply of Mounjaro for patient DW, patient 1, without authorization from the patient. Is that in fact true?
That is
And
correct.
can you tell the board why you did that?
Well, after a lot of self-reflection and discussing this with my peers and going over the reasons, I primarily out of embarrassingly to say, out of pride, complacency, were what led me to that mindset. And
Well, Kimmy, let me just
I
back
don't-
up a little bit. On that day that you did that, April 10th, 2023, what was your reason? Why did you set out to do that day?
I don't know that I set out to do it. I just know that I just know that it was wrong. I know it wasn't. I know that
And so now you filled a prescription, a 90-day supply for a patient DW, patient 1, and that was not authorized from the prescriber, correct?
yes, ma'am.
Where did the Mounjaro go?
It went to the refrigerator in the pharmacy.
Okay. But it didn't go to the patient. So where did it eventually end up?
Eventually, she came back and got the 90 days. She picked up a 90-day supply, and the nothing else left the pharmacy besides her 90-day supply.
Did you not tell during the investigation, did you not tell the board staff that you gave it to another patient? You recall that making that statement?
No, ma'am. I do not
Okay.
recall that.
And so respondents you billed DW's insurance for that without authorization from the prescriber. Is that a fair statement?
That's correct.
And at that point and the point of sale, who signed the signature pad as patient DW?
I did.
And why did you do that?
So that it would reorder, to complete the sale. And so it would, the inventory reorder, but then again, that was not the thing. That was not a correct.
And when you
action to
did
do.
that, what you had, the Monjaro did not go to patient DW on that day.
Not on that day, no, ma'am.
And you're saying it went back to the refrigerator and you don't know where it went after that.
No, I believe it was sold eventually, but it didn't leave the pharmacy and.
Okay. All right, let's turn now to allegation 8. You can look on your notice. So on May 8th, you were contacted by the Board of Pharmacy staff. Is that correct? You recall that?
Yes,
And you told Dr. McCready that DW had requested the medication and a man that you thought was her husband picked it up through the drive-through. Is that a true statement?
no, it's not. That was a false statement.
Okay. And then at that point, you faxed a prescription to the Board of Pharmacy staff. Is that true?
That is correct.
And that prescription that you provided to the board, is that a legitimate prescription?
No, it was not.
Tell me how you made that prescription.
I think it's, I'll piece it together.
How did you piece it together?
Just cut and paste, to try to get a prescription, that just, out of, I guess, fear and desperation that I was, like I said, I've realized this was a very embarrassing, very humbling experience and out of character. And, I just panicked, didn't know what to do. And so,
So you, and turn to, if you would, in that packet, to exhibit 14. And exhibit 14 has several documents attached to it, if you can find that. So I count I count 12 pieces of paper here in exhibit 14. Do these documents reflect what you used to make this fictitious prescription for patient
yes,
DW?
there's no denying that's what I did, and not denying that at all.
So tell me, explain to the board what these documents are. The first one is the completed prescription that you created. Is that true?
That's correct.
Okay. And then you did several things from other pieces of paper. So the second page, there's notes, and I'm not sure those are your notes, but it says parts of this document were whited out. Is that
Yes.
true? So
Yes,
you used white out on that to change the refills and the dosage, correct?
Yes, that is, correct.
All right, and then document, let's see, 3 is a final copy. Look at document 4. Again, you've cut out documents or information from the records. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And again, document 5, same thing. You're cutting out information to change the dosage and information for patient DW. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, and you flip to the next page, you cut out a large section of that to reflect the correct patient information. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then the next page, document 7 is what's on the top of it. And the note says bottom of constructed facts. Is that what this is?
Yes.
And then the next document, it has a little note, document 8, says it's final construction reduced to appear as a facts. Is that a fair description of that document?
It is.
Okay, and then the document, next document that says 9. You also manipulated that document as well to cut out the quantity.
Yes, ma'am.
And tell me what the next document is that says document number 10, that note at the top. This is also a fictitious document as well, isn't it?
Yes, that was this was a print. The computer Pioneer will allow you to generate a refill request, and that's what this was.
And the date on that says 4/10/2023. Is that? That's not correct date, is it?
It wasn't, but for insurance purposes, my supervisors were wanting me to have that date correct, so that was the actual fill date.
And then the next document is looks like something from Ortho, Arkansas. Where did you pull that from? That's somebody completely different that would have come in on, correct?
Yes, I think on this one, what was cut out was just I think the number 10 or 5 or something.
All right. And then there's the next document says document 12 at the top. Again, you cut out the date on that. And the dotted lines there reflect what was cut out. Is that
And
true?
that's where I inserted the date on document 10, I believe.
Okay. And then the last one in this exhibit, that note says the complete section was cut out. What was cut out for that? Do you recall?
Oh, it would have been the Monjaro 5 milligram dose.
So you used all these documents to make a fictitious prescription. Is that a fair statement?
That's fair. Yes, ma'am.
And you did that at the bequest of your employer, or did you do that because Dr. McCready and the board staff was calling about this?
The initial reason was for employer and insurance because I was going with the story that, I had done it to help a patient out. Or I say the story, the lie that was told about that. And then once I got to when Dr. McCready called, the document, I had the document, and that's what I sent to her.
Okay, to cover up your story.
Exactly. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
All right, let's turn to back to the order notice of hearing, if you could. All right. And you were eventually terminated for this as well, correct?
Yes.
And in your interview with your employer, you admitted that there was other patients that you did this with as well. Is that, you recall admitting to patient CH? changing the prescription refills on her?
Her situation was not related to diversion or taking them. It was,
Well, do you recall admitting that to your employer?
yeah, yes,
Okay.
what I admitted was that all of the, basically I was admitting what I did was wrong and that I had lied about it and had, lies and deceit. It's just, it's a slippery slope and
Right. So let's turn to another patient, RW, who is actually DW's spouse. Did you submit a fraudulent prescription and fill it through the point of sale for him?
yes.
And why did you do that?
That was, for, trying to offset the inventory loss that I had created.
So that was covering up what you'd done previously?
Well, I was trying to cover up, yes, the medications that we dispensed to her that we ultimately had to reverse out of the system, so.
And but DW's Manjaro, you said, was in the refrigerator.
Yes, it was in the
Okay.
refrigerator.
So why then would you have to cover it up by doing another transaction with her husband, RW?
Well, the reason that, because we were not paid for any of them because I had, it wasn't a legitimate prescription, so they were all reversed.
Okay, and RW's never been a patient of ExpressRx?
He has, yes.
He has?
He still, yeah.
Okay. Who signed the point of sale for RW's transaction?
If I recall correctly, I did.
RW never appeared in the pharmacy, is that correct?
No, ma'am. Typically, he came for the drive-through.
Did he come through the drive-through and pick up this Manjaro?
No, ma'am.
He never had a prescription for Manjaro, did he?
No.
Okay. All right, and back to CH, patient number 3. That's the one that you admitted during, or may have admitted to, in your interview when you were terminated. And if you look at allegation 16, alleges that you increased the quantity from 1 box to 2 boxes, but patient CH only received 1 box. You can turn to that in the order of notice. So on page 3.
Okay.
Do you see A16?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Is that a true statement? Did CH only receive 1 box after you increased the quantity from 1 to 2?
Yeah, the reason she only got 1 box, and like I said, anyway, the reason she only got 1 box was because she had, I can't remember the reason, but a box had been, wasted, or she didn't, it came back, or so I went back and it was wrong to do that, but I billed for a 2nd box and, gave that box to her because she had wasted her 1st box.
Okay. So, but you changed the quantity.
Yes, I did. And
Did you have authorization to do that?
yes, it was written for a 90-day supply, originally, and we just dispensed 1 box.
Okay. Okay. And then you admitted to altering that to ExpressRx management, or you don't recall that?
If they said I admitted it to them, then I admitted it to them. I
Okay.
don't.
All right, let's go to allegation 18, which is on the next page. And this is another patient, 1 of 4. Patient DM. And the allegation is that on April 18th, you filled that Manjaro prescription for him without authorization from the prescriber. Do you recall that?
I do. That was one that he and I had a discussion about whether it was covered under his insurance.
Okay. And then when authorization was requested by the prescriber, what did the prescriber tell or write back?
They denied the prescription.
And didn't they say it was the correct drug but wrong patient?
Yes, and then eventually, it was reversed by one of the other pharmacists.
Okay, but it was not reversed by you?
No, ma'am, I didn't.
The point of sale show that it was sold?
If it did, it was so that it would order. That's the only reason it would.
There was, say that one more time, you ordered another one?
No, the only way that, these drugs they were in short supply and so, and expensive. And so our inventory system would only order it if it was sold at the point of sale. And so what we would do is we would, if they were there, they would sign it. If they weren't there, we would initial and when they came to pick it, when it came in, they'd pick it up, we reversed the claim or reversed it out of the register, and then they would pick it up at that point and then
Was
sign
it
for counseling.
reversed by you or was it reversed after you were terminated?
If I'm not mistaken, it was reversed before I was terminated because I remember, if I remember right, I had a phone conversation with a pharmacist. He found the label on the computer and he called me about it. And I said, yes, we need to reverse that.
Okay. But you don't recall if that was before you were terminated
I
or
do
after?
not, no, ma'am.
Okay.
I think it was before, but
So do you agree with me that even though we're not talking about a controlled substance, this would constitute diversion
I agree. Yes, ma'am.
and potentially, I mean, fraudulent on your part with regard to insurance policies and submitting some of these?
Yes, it's like I said, very embarrassing, but yes, I did do that.
But you
Yes.
can't, I mean, I think what the board's probably curious about is why? Why did you do all this? Did you get some sort of monetary gain from it?
No, it was for personal. I was gonna, if it was for personal use, it wasn't.
So you were gonna use the Manjaro? Okay. And so is that eventually what happened with all these missing boxes of Manjaro? They ended up with you,
No, they didn't leave the pharmacy.
but you used them while you were at the pharmacy?
No, I didn't use them at all.
Okay, so I'm confused then. Why are they for your use?
Well, because whenever number one, we didn't have them for me to, but me using, I was going to use, I don't have a good answer for that. I don't,
What do you mean by use? You were going to ingest the Manjaro for yourself?
yes.
Okay, so you were gonna take this
Personal.
medicine
Personal
was-
use.
fictitiously prescribed or however you got it through these 4 patients, you were gonna take it yourself.
Yes, ma'am.
Um. Okay, so you don't have a prescription, you didn't have a legitimate prescription for Manjaro for yourself?
No, ma'am.
And you felt like, why did you want to take the Manjaro?
To lose, for insulin resistance and to try to lose weight.
Okay. I mean, you don't appear to have a weight problem. Did you have a weight problem before or you felt like you did or?
I would say I always felt like I have a weight problem, but a lot of it was just out of, like I said before, the pride, complacency, and it wasn't, that's.
So you did it for a while in the spring with these 4 patients. Had you been doing it before then?
No, ma'am.
So it was just these 4 patients?
It was, yes, it was the 2 patients, patient 1 and 2, were related to gaining the Manjaro for personal use. Patient 3 and 4 were actually 4 choices. The way they were handled, I would have handled them differently, but they were not intended to divert for personal use.
Okay. And when we had the informal hearing, you didn't mention to the board that you took this Manjaro, and I think Dr. McCready may have been the one that asked you why you did this, and you kind of said, I don't know. But the truth is that you did at that point know why you did it.
Yes, that's correct. I'm
So
not
when you
admitting
told the board members and the staff that you didn't know why you did it, the truth is, at that point, you knew you took it, the Manjaro, to use for your personal use.
that's correct. I have admitted that, yes.
And that's all I have for Dr. Williams. Okay. I'll make a note and redact that. Exactly, yeah, thank you.
Some people looking for those.
Yes, sir. Dr. Williams, you're a PD,
Yes,
correct? And when were you licensed?
1998.
And go ahead and talk to the board, not me,
Oh,
so
I'm
they
sorry.
can hear you. Can you take the board through your employment history as a pharmacist since 1998?
Out of college, I went to work for Walmart in Durant, Oklahoma. And that was about a 50-minute drive from home. I was living outside of, McAlester, Oklahoma. So I went, found a job. The Oklahoma Department of Health was hiring for director of pharmacy at the Carl Albert Mental Health Hospital. And I took that position and was there until I had some personal issues. At that point, I left that job and then moved back to Arkansas. Started.
You went to college at the University of Oklahoma?
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
okay, go ahead.
Went to work for Kroger as a floater pharmacist in Arkansas. Then took a position at a stationary position with Kroger until 2001, and then went to work for Berkshire's Grocery Company in Arkadelphia and was there for almost 15 years to 2015 when I went to work for All Care Pharmacy. And was there until 2021 when Express RX bought 4 of their stores. And yeah.
Okay. And so you've been in retail pretty much your entire career.
That's correct.
And what is your current employment?
I've been doing nursing home, long-term care, customer relations with long-term care.
For who?
WP Malone.
Okay. And that was the All Care Pharmacy that you worked at previously?
Yes, same parent company, just now it's the long-term care side, and I've just been doing nursing home not consult, relations.
Okay. And so you were working at All Care when Express RX bought out All Care, and then that's how you came to be
Yes.
at Express RX?
Yes.
And where was that store located?
Prescott, Arkansas.
Okay. Other than this allegation, have you ever had any complaints against you, accusing you of fraudulent prescriptions or falsifying records or anything of that nature?
None at all.
Other than this incident, have you ever had any disciplinary actions with any boards or with any of your employers?
No,
Now, you've admitted you did wrong in this case.
that's correct.
Okay. I'm going to briefly go through a couple of these prescriptions. And I'll kind of group DW and RW, her husband, together. And is that the prescription that you were going to use, the Manjaro that you were going to use for your own personal use?
Yes.
And what is the purpose of Manjaro? Or what were you going to use it for?
Weight loss, insulin resistance, weight loss.
And you used to, as I understand it, play football for a college in Oklahoma?
Yes, sir.
And were you feeling like you were kind of losing your, I guess, your fitness?
Yes, after 50, Yes, sir.
And so you decided to try Mounjaro
Yes,
and you didn't have a prescription. And so you dummied up a prescription under DW's name, correct?
correct.
And how did this all start unraveling for you after you did that? Did you ever, number one, did you ever get that package of Mounjaro?
No, sir.
Okay, so take the board through kind of how it unraveled on you.
I received a phone. I was off work the day, that she, first of all, I didn't know that she was taking the medication. So she was getting it at another pharmacy, I guess, because we couldn't get it.
But did she have a prescription on file?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
go ahead.
And so, prescription was created and billed. And at that point, I was still hanging on to it, I guess you could say, and not fully on board with what I'd done, although anyway. So I took when I was at home, I was called, they said she's here to get it. They couldn't find it because I had put it in the main storage refrigerator, not the refrigerator that they come when a patient comes to get medicine. And since I had signed for it, it appeared as it had left the store. Patient one said she could not find the medication, or patient one said she didn't pick it up. So I said, well, give it to her. We'll work it out when I get back to work. So when I came back to work, the story was, that somebody had, like anybody would say, they saw that I had signed it out. So the assumption was that somebody else other than her had picked it up. And I went with that story, and that lie grew, and regretfully, I followed along with it instead of putting it to rest.
The DW eventually called the board thinking that someone had stolen her identity or
Yes,
something of that nature.
yes.
Okay. And then Dr. McCready and I believe Dr. Kirtley called you.
Yes, they did.
And at that time you were continuing on with the deception.
That is correct. Yes, sir.
And so in an attempt to not let this unravel on you, you made some more poor decisions. correct?
Yes.
And tell the board what you did.
My other poor decisions were I tried this more deception and lies with Dr. McCready and Dr. Kirtley on the phone. That fear, trying to cover it up. It was.
And where did her husband, RW, where did he come into the prescription that you were trying to get under DW's name for your own personal use?
He came in to try to correct the inventory, I guess, and
Did another package of Mounjaro come into play, or are we still talking about one package of it right now?
one package.
And that'd be under DW's name,
Yes.
then you tried to correct the inventory by
Yes.
using her
Yeah.
husband, RW.
RW is only existed as a label. It was never.
So let's go to patient 3, which is CH allegation 16. And if I understand your testimony correctly, CH had lost or wasted a box that you'd already dispensed to her of Mounjaro.
Something had happened, yes, and she was asking for a refill. It was too soon.
It was too soon to refill it. So what did you do in an attempt to help CH, although you recognize you shouldn't have done this?
Reversed the claim,
For her original
our
box?
original box and rebuild it for 2 boxes. But I don't at this time,
Okay.
that's what I did.
And then you already had 1 box, but you gave her the second box that was billed to her insurance?
It was, yes, it was on order. I don't know that she ever came and picked it up, but I do know that the intentions were to replace the box that she had wasted or, yeah.
And was that for your own personal use?
No, sir.
Okay. This was something you were trying to do for CH, although you recognize.
That was not the correct way to handle that
Not the correct
situation.
way. Okay. And then the final patient is a DM. And as I understand your testimony, you were submitting a claim to see if it was covered by insurance, kind of like
That's claim.
a test claim. Okay, and tell the board exactly how that worked. First of all, were you trying to get medicine for yourself through DM?
No, sir.
Okay, tell the board what you were trying to do.
See if it was covered on his insurance. He was asking about it. I guess just he'd heard so much about the medication. He asked me about it. Want to know if it was covered. I said, well, I'll try and see if it's covered. So I did that. It was covered. And then it was found out and therefore ordered at that point.
You were doing that so that your inventory system would order the Manjaro that this
For him,
patient
yes.
DM wanted.
Yes, that's correct.
But eventually, I guess, was it Fred Harris that called you or?
Yes, Fred called me. And he said, I think we need to reverse this one. I said, yes, we do. And so he reversed it.
Was that your intention the whole time to reverse that claim and just run it as a test claim?
Yes, I was waiting for it to come in stock. If I reversed it, then it would take it out of the sold queue and it would take it out of the order queue as well. It wouldn't order it.
But you weren't trying to order this for your own personal use?
No, sir.
That was for DM who wanted this
Yes,
and had a prescription,
we were in the process of getting.
trying to get a prescription. Okay. Okay, and then tell the board, so you're not denying that you've done wrong here.
No, not at all.
Okay, tell the board, and you voluntarily surrendered your license at the informal hearing, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you hadn't been working as a pharmacist since then.
Right.
Okay, tell the board what you have been trying to do to gain insight as to why all of a sudden you did this.
Well, I have entered into, started therapy, just trying to figure out why, because that was a question that I had in my own head. Why did I do it? What led me to that? And because I felt like ethically and morally that was, in hindsight, or when you step back and look at something, it was very grotesque and very, out of character and just I just really couldn't believe that I had what I had done, but by the time I pumped the brakes on it, it had taken off. But still now I realize that I should have just stepped in and pulled somebody aside, either my employer at that time or come to Dr. Kirtley and just had a conversation with him about it. And just come clean with what I've done. That would.
So you've entered into a counseling arrangement.
Okay, yes, sir.
With who?
Dr. Michael Margson in Conway.
Okay. And then have you also taken a course on pharmacy ethics and practice?
Yes.
And is this some kind of thing you just do on an hour or so? Tell the board about the course. It's exhibit 1 and 2 in your exhibits.
The course, I was hungry, I guess, if you want to use a way to describe. At this time, I had already admitted to basically everybody but the board what I had done. And being ashamed about that, telling your spouse, your son, your family, what you did, what you've done was not a fun event. And so I wanted to make sure that would never happen again. Reason or no, there would not be a opportunity. So I entered into this course. It started out with a phone conversation with Dr. Stevens on. He's a ethics he's a pharmacist and he has a PhD in ethics. And so we discussed.
Where was the course out of? Who gave the course?
It was University of Tennessee College of Pharmacy. But Dr. Zahn was an employee of, it was with a relationship with Albany Medical College.
Okay.
And he teaches ethics at Albany Medical College.
And how long was the course?
It was scheduled for, it was a 25-hour CE, but I probably spent 35 hours doing it because there was so much information in there that I felt was very helpful and very clear, a lot of clarity.
Now, exhibit 1 is a description of the course that you're talking about right now?
Yes.
Okay. And then exhibit 2 is like after you had finished the course, what is that? We had a write-up. We did a write-up before the course, basically explaining, kind of admitting or bringing into the light what you had done. For me, that's what it was. But he asked to explain your situation, what you did, kind of what is bringing you to this course. And so that was my initial write-up, basically what has been brought to the light today. During the course, a lot of things were discovered, a lot of renewal, a lot of learning on ethics and morals and situations and decision-making, better decision-making, some algorithms for the decision-making. Then the final part of the course was a paper basically saying, what is it the course taught you and how can you apply it to your situation to make sure it doesn't happen again? And so do you feel like you learned a lot through this counseling and, well, through the experience, number one, but through afterwards, the counseling
Yes,
that you're engaged in
Yeah.
currently and through this course?
definitely.
Are you willing, as part of your punishment to talk to, even though this wasn't a controlled substance, but it was still a prescription, are you willing to talk to pharmacy groups and classes and things such as that to share how you went down?
Yes, and as embarrassing as it is to relive, I would definitely be willing to explain to any pharmacist the slippery slope and that you can get on, and it may not happen in year 10. It may, but it's a slope that once you get on, it's can do things that when you step back and look, are not a decision that you would make. You would think, why did I do that? Or how did I come to that point?
Out of all of this, though, we're talking about one box of Manjaro that you're trying to get for your own self-use.
It was three, it would have been 3 boxes.
It would have been 3.
Yes, sir.
And that started out with DW. and then,
Yes,
And bled over into her husband, RW. I
Yes.
guess. But the other 2 boxes, the other 2 patients were not for your own personal use. It was either trying to help the patient get a box that they had wasted or
the price,
submit a
yeah.
claim to see if it would be
It's
covered
covered,
by
yes.
another patient's insurance. So you've admitted everything. You're here, pretty much hat in hand. What are you asking the board to do?
I would like the opportunity to practice pharmacy again and to apply what I've learned into practice and redemption, just so I can prove to myself, redeem myself redeem my actions and be a good pharmacist. I've enjoyed the profession. I enjoy the people. And with this renewal or lesson that I've learned, I feel like it will never happen again.
Now, you submitted character references. You have Dr. Shaver here personally, but you also exhibit 3 is a letter from Fred Harris. Is he a pharmacist that you spoke of earlier?
I've worked with Fred about 8. I've known him for over 20 years, but I've worked with him for 8.
And he's submitted a letter on your behalf. And then who is Dr. Craig Seals, exhibit 4?
He is a pastor at our church.
And he submitted a letter on your behalf as well.
Yes, he did.
Is there anything else you want to tell the board before they ask you questions?
I just want to apologize to Dr. McCready for not being truthful with you. I'm very sorry for that. I'm sorry to the other board members for wasting your time that day and not taking that opportunity to say, look, this is what I did. You guys helped me deal with it, because that's what I felt like the board, I've learned, or felt like even then, that you guys are here to help me, not crush me. So that's about all I'd want. I do want to offer sincere apologies, and to Dr. Kirtley as well.
Pass the witness.
A few more questions. Now redirect after.
Yeah.
I have one. So I guess the 4 prescriptions that we've talked about, or the 4 different patients, have all insurance companies and patients been made whole? Was there any, there's no out, insurance companies didn't end up paying
They didn't.
ultimately for a fraudulent
Right, they did not.
prescription?
Right.
No patients were incurred any co-pays or?
No, sir.
And also, did you ask your employer to reimburse them for the?
Oh, I did. I called through after completing the course and realizing what I'd done, and that communication with your peers, colleagues, other healthcare professionals is one way to not get into trouble and to keep things on the on a professional level. But I did call Galen Perkins of Express RX and offered a sincere apology to him for what I had during their investigation, you know, the deception that was there, and also offered to reimburse for any losses that the company incurred if there was anything that I owed them. But I told him if I met him at a meeting or somewhere, I wanted to be able to look him in the eye, shake his hand, and say, how you doing? And not have something, you know, still in there, you know, wanted to come clean with him.
Okay, thank you.
Just to reiterate, no money.
Correct.
Sorry. At one point you said that we dispensed. Were there other people involved in this cover up?
No, I was just speaking in generalized terms because I wasn't there every day, and so it may have got these things.
Would you please have the record reflect that I am present but not participating in the hearing, including questioning the witness, board discussion, or vote?
Let the record reflect Mr. Simpson replied, as counsel for the board began questioning of this witness, Mr. Simpson was here for the entire presentation of evidence, but he is abstaining from discussion or votes. That adequately reflect. Any other members of the board have questions?
Just, and this goes back to the question that Ms. Vales said is, I mean, you've admitted in principle you did wrong. You admitted that you lied. You admitted that you fabricated. You say you're sorry and contrite, but you're very hesitant to speak those words, and you kind of hem-hawing around. So, I mean, did it come right? You were doing this so that you could get drug for yourself. Frankly, you could have gone and just took it off the shelf, I guess. But did it boil down to money too? I mean, it's about $1,200 a box.
Yes, I would say greed was involved in that as well.
Okay. And
Yes,
you
sir.
admit that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And it just seems like an elaborate scheme involving 4 patients and potentially 3 boxes for nothing to have ever changed hands. And you
Yeah.
never used any of that drug.
No, sir.
Thank you.
Anything else from members?
You said at the end of the course that you had to summarize what you had learned and how you would apply it in the future so that this didn't happen again. Can you share that with us?
Yes, one of the discussions, or one of the discussions of communication was one of the part of the write-up. You have the. Oh, okay.
Exhibit 2.
Sorry, I didn't mean like an official document. I just meant like, could you just share with
Oh,
us? Yeah, like
yeah.
how you would not, what has changed so that you would not make the same decision again?
This realizing the seriousness, the covenant, there's a covenantal relationship between a patient and a pharmacist. That we have to have a covenant established with each other, and it's not like a covenant on paper or, but there is a covenant. And if I had held that covenant, that trust in higher esteem, then I never would have made that choice to break that trust and to break that covenant with her or him or whoever with the patient. And that would have prevented the entire thing, because you would approach something like that and it would have been like, remember the covenant that you have. It's kind of like if you try to have moral character and you have a covenant in a religion, then you'd say, well, that's what keeps you from, you're like, well, no, I appreciate that relationship and that covenant that I have. And so I'm not going to violate that covenant. And I think that's one major thing that I learned. And then too, just the communicating, honesty and communication, just say, stopping everything and say, look, if you've made a mistake or if before things ever get out of hand, you just step in and say, look, I've done this is wrong, and not try to avoid a minor conflict that turns into where we're at today. Welcome.
Dr. Williams, a few questions. 'Cause I think I got a little confused. You said DW did have a prescription in Express RX
Not with us. She had one at
at
Walmart.
Walmart.
Mhm.
Okay. And that's why you made the under tab 14, the cut and paste and the kind of craft project to make a prescription for DW.
Yes, that was why the prescription. Yeah, I didn't have one for her. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Did you go back and tell these patients, at least patient 1 and 2, what you had done?
I have not yet, but I have plans on, I've tried to call patient 1, but I've not have success getting in touch with her. So my next step is to write a letter of
Okay.
apology.
And did any of these 4 patients, they all had 0 copays, correct?
Yes.
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 Okay. All right. That's all I have.
Have nothing further.
Just one question. I'm sure it's in here, but we have quite a packet here. How long have you been out of practice? Since you came to the informal, I would imagine, but how long?
Almost 3 months.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, I'd like to call Dr. Brenda McCready. Dr. McCready, briefly tell the board members how this came to the board's attention.
We received a complaint from DW that she had gone into Walmart to pick up a prescription and they told her that it had been filled at Express RX. And that she stated that she did not get this medication there. She'd never had it there. And so I contacted Dr. Williams and asked him about the prescription. He said, well, she did. And we sold it to somebody else. She came by the next day and we replaced it. And I said, so you sold it, it went out. He said, it went to some man in the drive-through. Well, it was a brand new prescription. So if it went to a man in the drive-through, he should have counseled. So he should have known where that prescription went. I believed him. He sent me a fax of the prescription and I called her and told her that they had replaced it and that he had explained what happened. She said, he's lying. I never got the prescription there. He did give it to me because he had filled it, but they had to replace it. They couldn't find it when I went in to get it. So he said it was in the refrigerator. Had it been in the refrigerator, the tech could have gone there and found it. We do not believe that it was in the refrigerator at that time. So we started investigating. We got a letter from him that said he had changed jobs. I called the pharmacy back and spoke to one of the pharmacists and asked had he been terminated, and they referred me to the corporate office. I asked him, he sent us a statement, and I think it's important that the board, I just want to read a part of this statement. At the bottom of his statement in Exhibit 4 says, pharmacists are required to solve problems for others many times each day. Loving and caring for others are the rewards for me for my profession. Unfortunately, no good deed goes unpunished. I know there was a better way to handle this situation. Much was learned. Ultimately, Mrs. W. received her medication and the true oath of a pharmacist was upheld. The true oath of he wrote this statement. We received this on 7/12. The true oath of a pharmacist was not upheld, and he knew that when he wrote the statement. He's admitted to lying. The board has done their due diligence to prove that the fraud was committed. He's admitted that he's lied. I'm not sure that we can take credence in everything he said today. That's for you guys to decide, but I think it's very evident what happened. That's all.
Anything else you want to add, Dr. McCready?
No.
That's all I have for Dr. McCready.
Dr. McCready, are you aware that they had 2 refrigerators at the pharmacy when you said the tech should have been able to find
I'm
it?
only aware that in his statement, he said they could not find the medication, that it was given to a patient.
Are you aware that they had 2 refrigerators? at
I'm
the
not, I
pharmacy?
said I'm not aware.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I have one other question for Dr. McCready. And as part of this investigation, several of the technicians that worked with Dr. Williams were also interviewed, correct?
That is correct.
And there's a one tech named Destiny Stewart, and she received instructions from Dr. Williams with regard to what
That is correct.
That was in the refrigerator for DW. What do you recall in that statement that she said about that?
She asked about, let me find it in here because I want to make sure I get it correct. That's about the cut and paste. There's 2 statements in here, so I need to find it. She asked him if he needed to explain to the patient, and he said, no, I gave that to another patient and they won't understand.
Today, Dr. Williams is saying it was still in the refrigerator.
That's correct.
Anything else you want to add?
Only that I think the technicians are aware that there are 2 refrigerators in the pharmacy and probably will check them.
And the technicians are also the ones that provided Express RX with this craft project, the cut and paste. Is that correct?
Yes, they are. One of the technicians walked to the back room and found all of the paperwork, the cut and paste things on the floor. And in her statement, she discusses that with Express RX corporate.
Anything else you want to add?
No, ma'am.
That's all I have.
Nothing.
So for closing remarks. Correct, yes.
I've already called Dr. Williams, so I would call Dr. Shaver just as a character witness for brief. Once you step on over. Would you tell the board your name, please?
John Shaver,
And you're a pharmacist?
I am
And how long have you been a pharmacist?
55 years.
And do you know Dr. Williams, Casey Williams?
I do. I worked with him for 8 years.
Okay. And can you tell the board what you observed about him as a person and as a pharmacist?
Well, right off the bat, I've never seen him do anything illegal. Let's put it that way. I've listened to y'all, I've heard him, he's done. I was not aware of that, but it depends on the degree and what the thing it rises to. He obviously made a mistake. He shouldn't have done it. But we all are pharmacists here and we've all seen all sorts of things that go on sometimes. When I first started in pharmacy, counter prescribing was awful. You know what I'm talking about. But fortunately, the laws have been changed so that if you follow the law, you'll have no problem, as long as you know what it is. I had actually 2 or 3 speeches all fixed up to talk to you about, but it's ridiculous for even me to go there. Casey obviously did what he did. I don't have a problem with having somebody have to do something, then you're going to be liable for it, and you're going to. And I assume right now he doesn't have a license and hadn't had for some period of time. Now he called me after all this had going on and said, I need a job. So I said, all right. I called Percy Malone, who I had worked for years and who's also 2 days younger than I am. And said, here's the deal. Percy asked him to call him, make an appointment. He did. Now, what Casey had told me initially didn't make any sense. I knew it. I told him, said, that's not right. And also in that process, I told him to get a lawyer. But the second time I went to see Percy, he told him the truth. I had not ever heard the truth until just now. I don't know what to say about it. There is punishment. I mean, I would have fired him myself if I had been the company. But it depends on the degree of punishment. We all know what everybody makes. We know what we have to do to survive. We have families. I would hate to see him out of pharmacy. Now, in the last few years, a lot of people are going into pharmacy not because they liked it, because they made more money. I obviously like it. I'm still working. He had a letter from his pastor. I didn't realize that he was a deacon, and I did know that he was one of those pharmacists that I worked for years, that if they had to work on Sunday, they wouldn't be working with that company. They'd find somebody else. Well, that's how he is. But he made a mistake. In Christianity, there's a word called grace. And what it means, a second. As far as I know, like, I was surprised what I heard today. I never asked him to tell me what he did, but I did tell him. I said, when this is over with, you're going to sit down in front of me and I'm going to look you in the eye and you're going to tell me exactly what you did. I don't have anything else to say. I just hope that he is not punished too much. He does have a soft heart, I've noticed, a lot softer than mine is. And he has a lot of regard for his patients. In fact, sometimes it appears too much. But I have nothing else to say. I've never even known that. I've never even been in here before. I didn't even know where you were.
That's probably a good thing. I'll pass the witness.
I don't have any questions.
Well, we were. Yeah, yes, sir. Yeah. We rest.
Members of the board, I think my issue with this case is he's coming here after previously being in front of the board. He was not forthcoming. I would call those lies, what he'd said to the board members before. It seems to be a pattern. He starts off with lying. Eventually, after he gets caught, he'll come around and maybe start telling the truth. But I submit to you today, we still don't have all of the truth here. We may never understand exactly what happened. I think that we've presented enough evidence that these violations warrant a revocation of his license. Short of that, just as a matter of whether or not we can trust him to be a pharmacist and take care of his patients, board staff would recommend that he retake the law exam with a written section required to make sure he understands the law and again, what he did wrong. We would ask that he not be allowed to be a pharmacist in charge or an owner of a pharmacy. And we think that he needs to be on probation for at least 2 years. If the board doesn't feel that full revocation is warranted, we would ask for at least those provisions as part of his discipline.
Yes. Okay. Well, we appreciate the time today, and I hope everybody can understand that Dr. Williams came in here and he said the way it was, and he humbled himself and has admitted that he was wrong. It started out, he made an initial poor decision. He tried to get Mounjaro essentially for vanity, I guess, to try to lose weight because of his, I guess, his glory days back when he played football and he felt he was losing that. So he made a poor decision. And then it snowballed on him into many other poor decisions, trying to lie to Dr. McCready and Dr. Kirtley, dummy up a prescription to cover it up, but it all fell apart. And so here we are today. So, but I do think it's just one patient that he was trying to get this medication on. It wasn't the other 2 patients. He explained that one, he was replacing something that the patient had lost or destroyed accidentally, trying to help that patient. And the other one was just a simple insurance check to see if it would be covered for that patient. So we're really talking about DW and then what he did with DW's husband to try to cover up that initial Mounjaro prescription. No one, insurance company or patient, has lost any money. He has tried to go through and correct what he can himself, other than just being humbled and embarrassed in front of his peers and his family. He is engaged in counseling to try to understand why he would do this and why he would step out of character. By all accounts, he had good character before this. And he's taken an intensive 25-hour course that had a lot of interaction with it. And he's written a statement as to what he got out of that course. I can say that we're requesting that he please not to revoke him. That's pretty much the death penalty in pharmacy, but allow him to retake the law exam, not be a pig for as long as needed, be on probation and under supervision for as long as the board deems advisable, and any other conditions that the board thinks are proper to be sure that this won't reoccur again. So that's what we're asking. Thank you.
Time for the lawful record for the board.
Thank you. So we're off the record. Thoughts? What is the will of the board?
I have some thoughts, but I'll wait. They're kind of comprehensive, so I'll wait to hear what others have to say.
Oh, this is tough. We have the incident that occurred, but rather than one time and occurred 4 times that we know of. Probably a lot that we don't know about. And the why behind it, we don't know. A lot of unknown.
Thank you, Dr. Mason.
But no, but thought that we would not.
Any other thoughts?
Well, here's I'm disappointed that as we sit here, the status of things that we heard 4 months ago. I mean, he's at least admitted that he did it, that he was wrong, that he lied about it. I guess we can just infer that it was purely for his own use, but he seemed to have trouble just outright saying it. He would seem to get to that point to want to say it, but then he wouldn't bring himself to say it. So I'm still not sure we have the whole truth. But as we look, there are 4 people involved, 4 individuals. 2 of them revolved around the same potential fraud. I'm not clear whether the efforts for the 3rd person was to fraudulently bill for 2 boxes instead of 1. And for the last one, that while it may be a test run to see if it was covered, he did admit that he didn't reverse it. So he didn't have a prescription. And he didn't reverse it, and he didn't reverse it because he wanted the drug to come in. Well, why? Now, based on what the board has said, that there seems to have been at least 1 box that went somewhere, that it wasn't in the refrigerator, it went somewhere. So I agree that revocation of his license would be a bit stern. The fact that he's been without his license now 3 or 4 months, that may be enough for time served as far as loss of his work as a pharmacist. I agree with the board's proposal that he be required to repeat the state law exam because clearly laws were broken here. That at no point in the rest of his career until we decide otherwise that he cannot be a PIC or an owner of a pharmacy. And that going forward, at least for the next 2 years, he'd be on probation. But I think there's some other things, the program that he went through, the ethics program, I didn't see it in the exhibits. I would like to see that. I think educational component would absolutely be required, but if he has done that, I would be accepting of that as long as we can see a copy of it. I think that public service could be a requirement. And it would be reasonable things. 2 things that came to mind is that 1, that was mentioned about him going out and talking to pharmacy groups. There are 2 schools of pharmacy that he could go and tell what he did. That could be part of it. Something else that comes to mind, and it's totally unrelated, but still public service. We're coming up on Medicare Part D enrollment. Perhaps he could dedicate some of his time to helping folks there. But anyway, I would advocate for 100 hours of public service. I think absolutely he has to admit to the patients, the 4 people involved, that he did wrong. And I don't think that writing the letter to me seems passive. I would face-to-face is how you own things. So I think that he should be required to own that with the patients. He could supplement it in writing, but do it in person. And then I think because we don't know what the truth is, because there are 4 different people involved, there's at least 1 that's missing. So there could be 1 that would require restitution. This drug's about $1,000, $1,200 a box, I think, a month. And because there's 4 incidents, that there'd be a fine of $1,000 per incident. So that would be about a $5,200 fine plus these other things. So those are my thoughts.
How did you get the 5,200?
$1,000 fine for each of the 4 individual prescriptions, and then the one that appears to have been the box missing from the refrigerator at $1,200 a box. Oh, it was a 90, okay, so 3
Were
boxes.
drugs ever actually unaccounted for?
Well, I think we'll have to go back on the record. We would have to go back on the record, I think, to ask.
I think
ask
that was
that.
very vague.
Okay, do we want to go back on the record to get clarification on that? Mr. Jackson can.
At this time, the board has elected to go back on the record for additional evidence. Chair, can you ask your question on the record?
So, Dr. McCready, do we have any type of, I guess, evidence?
The only thing we have is his statement that the 3 boxes for DW went out the window. We also have the fact that the corporation had to reverse the other claims after the fact. But I don't have a statement in here that says those 3 boxes were gone. We have evidence in the packet that shows that CW got a prescription in March and she got another one in June, which leads to believe that she didn't actually need it in April. I don't know that. So as far as a statement from the corporation, all I have is that they were forced to reverse those prescriptions, and his statement that at least 3 boxes went out the door.
Thank council. Do you have any
Dr. Casey, Dr. Williams, would you just explain your take on what did or did not go out the door with these 4 patients?
Yeah. I think to my knowledge, went out the door, other than, what she. Certainly she. Basically came and get it, and they took those 3 boxes that did the first, the original 3, never left the pharmacy or in second.
So it actually was 6 boxes is what we believe, because the 3 that were missing, and then he had to replace those 3 for her. So that's actually a total of 6 that we believe are missing. Because and then there's still the DW that he signed for and ran the prescription through. It wasn't reversed until a later date, and we believe that medication left the pharmacy.
Council, Dr. Williams, can you address what Dr. McCready just said? If you need to clarify any of that.
Yes, nothing. Also said she came. Did not pick up from one.
Yes, but there was mention of someone's box that was replaced. Who was that? Was it of the third?
Patient
Or-
3.
Yeah, so there was a box that went out.
He signed for that.
I don't know if she got it the day that I did. It doesn't, when I was looking through there, it looked like she wasn't registered. I didn't do that until like 5 days after I added that second box, and then 5 days later, and then it was time for one picked up from the receipt, the registered receipt. Somebody else, one of the cashiers rang her up, and she got the. I was thinking at that time when she got her second box.
So she had a legitimate prescription. You dispensed 1 box. She came back to the pharmacy, said, this box, I've left it out in the car, something's happened to it. You reversed the claim for 1 box, rebilled it for 2 boxes, gave her 1 additional box.
I have a question though, but CH never signed the point of sale. You signed that, correct?
No, I didn't sign. her.
Did CH sign it?
Yes,
It looks like the same signatures on RW, which was yours.
Her signature is right there.
So yeah, if you look at exhibit number 22, you have a
I think
signature.
that- at that point, that was the day that,
Well,
yeah,
well, hold on, but if you look at 22, that's CH's signature, correct?
yes,
And then if you look and flip to exhibit 24, It's signed CH, but that doesn't look like the original signature. That's my only point.
Oh.
Yeah, okay.
But I don't recall signing that. If it was signed out, I don't know if the cashier, you know, I said, I don't know, but I know it had to go through the register before it would order for her.
Okay. But you agree those signatures look a little different?
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
definitely.
okay.
So in sum, the board's best estimation is that 6 boxes are gone.
The best estimation is 6, plus the Camilla would be 7, but our best estimation is 6. And then we don't know what happened to DW. It was signed out and it was signed by Dr. Williams. And that's the one he said was a test claim, but he did sign it out with his signature.
Did Express RX ever say what their balance on hand, if it was higher than what they expected it to be, or did they ever?
Express RX, if you note on one of their emails, felt like this investigation might impede patient care and they were not as forthcoming as maybe they could have been.
Wrong with the system where they're selling and not selling and unselling, and that seems
I think that too.
difficult to keep track of things.
So did that give you better guidance from the fine standpoint?
It does.
Get a flat rate, it doesn't have-
Based on that, I would go with the higher number. I mean, it's the only objective number we've been given.
6,000.
6,000, well, it'd be 7.2.
Well, one of those boxes though did have a legitimate prescription.
The 6, those related to the first, not the other one. So that's the only 6 I'm talking about. So that would be $11,200 would be the fine.
How is that?
4,000 for each incident, and I don't know that the money for the drug that needs to go back to wherever it was lost. That would be restitution.
That company saying
Yeah.
they didn't lose it.
Then he offered that to the company. He's called them and offered to pay restitution for those claims.
Well, I mean, we certainly, I
We
think,
can donate to a scholarship fund or something, but, if they refuse, put it in a rural scholarship or, place it somewhere where it could be of use to someone.
I thought we were maxed out at $1,000 per incident. And go up to 1,200 per missing box from a restitution standpoint.
yes, that's where the math came in.
Two separate things. Fine.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I was saying a fine of $1,000 per incident and restitution for 6 boxes.
Well, I'm debating, are we? Certainly for instance, I'm 100% on board. I'm just trying to wrap my head around the restitution our issue. He didn't take it from us and we're not gonna give it back to the company. I don't know if that, maybe you have a good reason or why.
That's a good point. Lenore's suggestion is another valid way to handle it. Or
Make a donation to a scholarship fund.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
it's-
that's,
Money to someone else,
that's what,
although it's a great idea, but I don't know that legally we can do it.
So let's worry about what he did wrong that we have control over.
Well, if there's nobody to identify who lost something specifically, other than the evidence that suggests that it was gone, then that part of it would reasonably go away. Yeah.
Period.
Mhm.
Any other discussion?
Well, we have to, I agree with everything Dr. Richmond said about the all tests and all of those. issues that you- So it'd be $4,000 plus each of those things.
Yeah, I've got retake the law exam, no pick / owner, 2 years minimum probation, 100 hours of public service. An apology or admission to
So
patients. and
they may not want a face-to-face apology. I think if we
Right, they may.
require a face-to-face apology, that's doing a disservice to the patient.
I agree.
So I would just say an apology, and if that's a letter, that may be all they are willing to accept.
I agree.
I do agree with that too, because we can't make that the patient in here. I agree, in person is so much better and you probably feel better if you did it, but
Did we get the allegations? It's true. Charges proven.
Pick basis, is that something that, or they have to come back before the board to do, or does that run current probation?
I don't know.
not 100% sure if we can do something past probation. Can we say forever you can't be a picker owner, or is it a set? Or does he have to come back before the board, or?
Well, that would be,
How do we
be
clarify?
a
I mean, you could do
restriction.
it. I mean, if he wanted to be a pick, he would have to come back in front of the board.
Okay.
It should also run concurrent with the probation that he's prohibited from being a pig for at least 2 years. The probation is 2 years.
I think the picker owner would be indefinite, right?
Till he comes back.
I mean, it would at least be
Yeah.
2 years.
Yeah.
but then-
Yeah, I'm saying
but
a
then it
minimum
would
of
be-
2 years,
yeah.
right?
Any other discussion or points of clarification? So we'll go back on the record. Are you,
I can make it. Well, the only thing we'll recognize that as part of it, we would have expected, we recognize that he has done continuing education as part of it.
all right? I think we're ready to go back on the record.
We're back on the record for finding of facts, conclusions of law, and penalties to be handed down. I'll turn it back over to the chair.
So do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion. In the case number 2023-088 involving Casey Williams, PD 08798. Allegations 1 through 18 being true and the charges 1 through 8 having been proven. We call for the following disciplinary actions. That Dr. Williams be placed on probation. He'd be returned to practice, but he'd be placed on probation for a 2-year period. That he not be permitted to be a PSC or a pharmacy owner at a minimum during the next 2 years, but would require coming before the board for approval after that. That he be required to repeat the state law exam, which would include a written essay portion. We recognize his completion of continuing education efforts on law and ethics. And so we incorporate the program that has been provided in part of this. That he be required to complete 100 hours of public service specifically related to issues around which this case involved. And we've given some examples of that. And that he be fined $1,000 per incident for each of the four listed in the allegations. So for a total of $4,000 fine.
Before I call for a second on the public service, is there a time frame that we would expect that to be completed in? 2-year probationary period?
Yeah, I think that would be fine.
Okay, so we have a motion.
I have a question. With regard to recognizing the continuing education that he presented today, is that in addition to the regular requirements for CE, or would that be included in his
But it definitely would be over and above his.
over and
usual
above what he's
CE.
required? Okay,
Yes, but he's already completed it.
right.
But yes, this could not count in his CE requirement.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
So we have a motion. We have a second.
I'll second.
A motion by Dr. Richmond, a second by Dr. Newsom, noting that Mr. Simpson is abstaining, and all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Let the record reflect the decision is unanimous. If boards of council can reduce the decision to rise and make service on all parties. On the chair to appeal the decision. appeal will be taken from each. Or the administrative procedure back. No other questions or comments?
One quick question for Ms. Bales. Because this is already October. If he took that CE thinking that would count for his 30, I mean, he has a couple more months. I just want to make sure there isn't any confusion on, I know this needs to be extra, no doubt about it. But I'm worried, I'm concerned if there could be question that he's already done it and counted that in his 30. So we just, I mean, he has a couple months, he could do that. But I just wanted to bring that up so there wasn't no issue.
I mean, he has several months to, if he doesn't have the 30 hours, he has several months to get those at this point. And he can go to NAVP CPE monitor and look, and it will tell him exactly what he's done. And he needs to just remember that those will probably, if that was CPE, ACPE accredited, he needs to remember that those will be included in that. So he needs to deduct those.
Okay, thank you.
Records closed.
Mr. Jackson, be okay to take a 15-minute break? Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Morning, my name is Adam Jackson.
I'm Ashley Vales, General Counsel for the Arkansas Board of Pharmacy.
I'm Michael Ayers. I am the president of Return Solutions.
My understanding is that y'all are wanting to present a,
Yeah, I have like 3 motions I can make, I think.
okay.
If you'll give me a little leeway. Just to complete the record, I'm gonna move that, introduce exhibits 1 through 16, in this case on behalf of the board.
Any objection?
No.
They shall be admitted.
And I'm gonna ask that board members take judicial notice of, pharmacy laws in the state of Arkansas, as well as our pharmacy rules.
So noted.
And then I have a 3rd motion. It's not really a joint motion, but I've talked to Mr. Ayers, and his proposal would be a monetary fine of $15,000. We don't have any objection to making it administrative cost if the board feels that this could be handled in a non-disciplinary manner. Basically, and I have Dr. Holland to testify, but Return Solutions is a business that does reverse distribution. And they did not have a license with state of Arkansas. And so in your exhibits, it'll show you how much of the transactions took place without a license. But board staff would agree to just assess, if the board feels fit, to assess a monetary $15,000. Disciplinary or non-disciplinary is up to the board, but we don't have an objection to making it non-disciplinary.
Are there any questions from the board?
So is this what you're making, proposing to us that we do before we go into the hearing?
Yeah, we can go into the hearing. I can give you some facts from Dr. Holland about kind of how we got here.
Okay.
But it's sort of a joint motion to resolve the case that way. If completely up to the board if you all see fit. But we can go into the facts of the case as well.
Okay, is Return Solution, are you agreeable to this?
Yes.
I think we would at least need to hear, I don't know that I need every single fact, but I would kind of like to know why they didn't have a license.
Okay, well, I can call Dr. Holland, and then I guess you can hear from Mr. Ayers. And Dr. Holland can kind of summarize how we got here. But we need.
Yeah, let me do some quick cautionary issues then. Again, this hearing is held under the Administrative Procedures Act, which means the strict rules of evidence do not apply. To ensure the efficiency of these proceedings, I will grant objections or caution parties only as necessary. If there's anything that you have in your possession you want the board to consider, you must offer it into evidence here today. And all parts of this hearing are subject to the Freedom of Information Act, which means that all parts, including the board's deliberations, are open to the public. Who's going to be your witness, counsel?
Dr. Brandon Holland.
And just in case you need to testify on your own behalf, I'm going to have both of you sworn in real quick.
Okay.
If you can raise your hand, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Let the record reflect that both witnesses have been sworn in this matter.
And I call Dr. Brandon Holland as the board's witness.
You may proceed.
Dr. Holland, how did Return Solutions come to your attention?
So when I'm out doing my inspections, that's one of the piece of demographic information that we record for each pharmacy is who they are doing their reverse distribution services through. And Return Solutions was one of our probably more common reverse distributors here in the state. And I received a phone call from a prospective reverse distributor from another state asking about licensure. And that subsequently led to me just looking into some of these reverse distributors that I commonly see here in Arkansas. And at that point, I noticed that Return Solutions was not licensed with us at that time.
All right, and as part of your investigation, you prepared kind of a summary of the transactions that Reverse Solutions engaged in at the time that they were not licensed. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And if you turn to exhibit number 15, can you just summarize for the board what your findings were as exhibited in this document?
Sure. So for the 2-year period that I reviewed, there were 40 pharmacies during that time that they had conducted reverse distribution services for. That was approximately about 140 transactions or 140 services where they performed reverse distribution, totaling somewhere around 19,000 medications, roughly 1,000 of those being Schedule II medications, roughly 2,000 being controlled substances.
All right, and how much was the total number of items that Reverse Solutions?
Total number of items, that's for bottles, not individual pill count, but somewhere around 19,088.
And as part of the subpoena process, we asked Reverse Solutions to sort of send us our procedures. And did you review any of those procedures? Or did you anything stick out to you that was concerning?
Nothing at the moment. When I reviewed them, some of the stores that I was in, as I review the process for sending a copy of the DEA Form 222 to the DEA on follow-up, they had told me that a representative had instructed them that they did not have to send a copy. So that kind of raised a red flag. That's why I believe we requested those policies and procedures.
All right. And since and then, is it true that Return Solution has submitted an application?
Yes, ma'am.
Anything else you want to add about your investigation regarding Return Solutions?
No, ma'am.
That's all I have for Dr. Holland.
I don't know.
So, Dr. Holland, why did they not have a license? Because they didn't know they were supposed to, or they had had one and let it lapse? What was the history?
Don't actually have the answer to that, Dr. Mack. From what I could see, they were never licensed with us at any point. I did various searches to see if I could pull anything related to them and could not pull any licensure at any point with us.
Because my concern is, I understand the whole thing and how many items and the fine and all that. My whole concern is the discipline or not. I mean, if you don't follow the law, if there's a reason, even if it's wrong, that's one thing. But if you don't get licensed because you didn't look or you wasn't intending to, I don't see how that's not discipline. That's my question.
I have a question for Dr. Holland based on that, if I could. So Dr. Holland, in your research regarding Return Solutions, you did discover that Return Solutions had been fined by the Alabama Board of Pharmacy. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
And that was for not having a permit with Alabama.
That's right.
So in that instance, and that was back in 2021.
That's correct.
Okay. So in your opinion, would that give Reverse Solutions a reason to believe that they might need licenses in other states?
In my opinion, yes.
Thank you.
I may have missed this, but do they currently have a permit?
They have applied after this investigation.
Are we considering the application as a part of this hearing?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else from the board? Didn't comment on it, but you get
If I'm on the wrong angle, I can't get it to turn.
At least you remember
Yes.
the sign needs to be bigger. So they're not properly licensed with the state, given that they've taken controls. I mean, are they licensed with the DEA?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Anything else from the board? Nothing else from the board? Anything else, council?
Now we rest.
Anything to add? There?
Yeah, I will add, as far as Alabama goes, we were licensed with Alabama, had been licensed with Alabama. It just lapsed for 2 years. So we had a license. And at the end of the day, I mean, the buck stops here. I'm the president, but I was unaware until one of our customers in Alabama called us and said, hey, do you realize that your license in Alabama has lapsed? And I did not. So we did pay a fine with Alabama and immediately had it reinstated, but prior to that, we were actually licensed in Alabama. And there are states that do not require licensure. We did not realize, as far as Arkansas goes, that we were required to be licensed here. The second that we learned that we were, I was communicating with Ashley, and we immediately hired a Real Solutions Group they're a consulting firm that sort of walks companies through the licensing process. We immediately hired them. They've been advising us, and we obviously were wrong not to be licensed here, and certainly do apologize for the oversight, but it was not an intentional that, hey, we know we're supposed to be licensed here and we choose not to be. It was not that at all.
How many states do you cover all 50 states, or
We did.
are you currently either licensed or in the process of getting licensed with every state that does require a reverse distributor to have some type of permit?
Yes.
When did the incident occur in Alabama? You said you were 2-year period, right?
Yeah, it was, let me see, I may have this here.
Just in general.
It was from January 1st, January 2018 to January 2020.
All right, so you knew at least prior, because you had a license prior to that, but it expired during that 18 to 20.
Correct.
So you knew at some point prior to 2018 that licensure was required in Alabama.
Correct.
Okay. Did you have licensure in other states at that point?
We did.
Then why did it not occur to you to check to get a license in Arkansas before you began taking control of drugs in Arkansas?
Obviously a very valid question, and I don't, as I said earlier, the buck stops with me. I'm not. We had someone in place who was in charge of that. And I don't want to throw anyone under the bus. It's not at all what I'm trying to do. But that person has since been reassigned. And we have a new person who has taken over compliance. And again, we've hired Real Solutions Group as well. And our new compliance director is working closely with them. It's something that simply me personally, I was not aware of, but we should have been aware of that.
That sheds a whole different light on it to me, that you actually had someone in place doing the work. They just didn't do it good and you weren't overseeing them. But it wasn't, we just wait till somebody tells us we need to be licensed and then we get licensed. So that does make a little bit of difference to me.
Anything else from the board?
I presume this permit application is going to be forthcoming. And I would just like to ask, do you have corporate counsel,
We do,
full-time lawyer employed?
not full-time,
Is that an employee or an outhouse counsel?
outhouse counsel.
Do you have an attorney in Arkansas?
I do not.
And so you have had a compliance person. What was the training or authorization of the compliance officer that dropped the ball?
That person had been with Return Solutions and has been with Return Solutions for probably 28 years. We tend to promote from within, which is something that we're looking at doing it a little differently now. So his training was sort of an on-the-job training over a period of many, many years. But in hindsight, I don't believe he was the right person for that particular job, even though he had been doing it for many years. I don't think that he was, again, I'm not trying to throw anyone under the bus. I'm just telling you, this is what happened. I don't think he was aggressive enough in contacting states to see if licensure was required. And I certainly was not aggressive enough with him to be sure that he was doing that.
What training did this person receive?
There was no formal training. It was over a period of, many years. There was no formal training.
I'm not talking about internal training. What external training did the person receive? Seminars, meetings,
So he's,
courses?
as far as that goes, he also handles our hazardous waste or hazardous materials. That's the training that he mainly has gone through. But as far as training for licensure, none.
Was there a prior compliance person that he learned under, so it was just him learning himself?
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes. May not have it pointed directly at me, but I do have it on this time. Okay, anything else from any party board member at all? Okay, seeing as there are none, council, how do you wish to proceed on this?
And rest at this point, as I said at the beginning, it's kind of all of the sections that occurred in I felt like $15,000. Discipline or administration.
Is there okay with everyone? I would like to accept what board staff has suggested for administrative costs of $15,000 in the matter of Return Solutions, case number 2023-099.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
A motion by Dr. Newsom. We have a second by Dr. Boone. I think we'll do this, just roll call vote on this one. So Mr. Simpson, if I could start with you. Dr. Davenport, Dr. Richmond,
Nay.
Dr. Mack, Dr. Newsom.
Yay.
Dr. Boone.
Aye.
I have 4 ayes and 2 nays. The ayes have it. Motion passes.
Okay, Let the record reflect, but by a vote of 4-2, the motion to accept the $15,000 has passed. Council, I'm assuming you can get all this sorted out, reducing it to writing by agreement and serve it upon all parties.
And just for clarification, that's an administrative fee or is it a disciplinary fine? Administrative fee. Okay, yes, I'll reduce that to writing. And I believe Mr. Ayers is prepared to remit payment today.
Unrelated to, I have some questions, just clarification, but unrelated to this gentleman. What's that?
We didn't even get to this.
Yeah.
I'm surprised. Do you ship back to manufacturers, by the way?
We do.
I'm surprised they don't require state licensure from you. Like a copy. I mean, typically that's, they want the state license and they want the DEA. So,
Manufacturers do not. They've never requested that.
okay.
Are we done?
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is not.
No, I'm just talking. I'm just asking a question.
Yeah, let's close it out.
Yeah.
If there are no other questions or comments, the hearing is concluded and the record is closed in this matter. We're off the record.
The type of licensure that they get, is it as a wholesaler?
It's a wholesaler to act as a reverse distribution wholesaler. Many states like Arkansas, and as he's discovered, he's been very forthright with that, require a wholesale distributor license as a reverse distributor for you to pull drugs from the state, not just to send into the state. So it is a little bit of a kind of a wonky area that a lot of people don't realize.
But we have the same requirements for third-party logistics providers.
But it
I
is.
mean, that is kind of shipping into.
Yes.
Yeah.
But since for some reverse distributors, I believe that the mindset is I'm not shipping to that state, I'm pulling from the state. And so they don't realize that there's a secondary different requirement on reverse distribution that you have to have permits in the states where you're pulling from, not just where you're sending to or where you reside.
Yep.
Oh.
Well, he's not right now. He's stopped, but with this hearing and resolving the case, then we would generally continue to process that, give him his permit so he can resume doing business as permitted.
And do I assume that that permit is going to come back before this board, before it's approved?
No, sir.
I'd like to move that we require this permit to come back before the board before it's approved. Because I, for one, am not satisfied at all with the compliance effort that we've been shown with regard to this. I mean, this lack of oversight is totally intolerable, and we don't know what else is not being overseen in this situation. So I'd like to ask that the permit come back so we can review what he's submitted and what evidence he's shown to show these issues have been correct.
Well, and my question and comment really kind of in support of that is the pharmacies are responsible for making sure that the wholesalers they work with are licensed. And so even if you argued that Return Solutions has a DEA license, and so therefore they at least in some way have some authority to take control of controlled substances, you still had, what was it, 15? Well, I forget how many, I can't find it. But something like 15,000 prescription drug bottles.
And many of those would have been when a pharmacy sends it, it's a large quantity. So the actual application is Exhibit 16 in the files. You have it in front of you now. And now that we're open, I mean, we've got another hour that this is what we had scheduled time for. If you guys want to have a discussion, you've got the company president here with you. Some of you may or may not know when he talks about hiring Real Solutions is I think a very well respected compliance group that has several members that have been within National Association of Boards of Pharmacy, within boards of pharmacy or connected to them. That's who they use to reach out and discuss these issues with staff on potentially how to handle it, how to fix it, how to stop, any business not realizing it. And I believe the president would tell you, part of what they've done with Rural Solutions, from my understanding, talking to them, is they've gone through an entire audit process to figure out exactly where they may have any other issues with the state. So I think your question previously of, thinking you have a regulatory person and then realizing that the regulatory person you have hasn't had the experience from only being in kind of this vacuum that you would hope, and then going, you know what, we're hiring regulatory experts and investing in that. That's kind of the change that I think we can see that they've done. That it may not look that way, especially if you don't know who Real Solutions is or what their practice is. But you've got him right here, and you've got the application if you want to discuss it.
Harold, are you saying that you want that to be on the record? Or just have a conversation?
I think that we've been alerted to a substantial problem. And I think, as with any other person seeking a license or a permit where we knew there was a problem, heck, we're going to have people come in this afternoon that pled guilty to shoplifting when they were teenagers. And we have them come in and demonstrate what they've done and how it is. This is a much more serious matter than that. That's what my point is.
And my point in support of that wanting to have this on the record is that this puts the pharmacists or the pharmacies that use their services potentially at liability as well, because they had a responsibility to make sure that the reverse wholesaler was properly licensed. And so I think that underscores the importance that Harold is making, that this be a conversation on the record.
Is June 1st the first day that, is that the first time that you operated in Arkansas, or is that just a date that we found to start with? What is the significance of 2021? Okay, so we only have 2 years worth of records. but There are more than that.
Yeah, that's my subpoena request
Got it.
started just for him to count from June 1. Just so we could get an
Do you
idea.
know how long they operated in Arkansas without a license?
Offhand, I don't know.
I think that one thing that staff has found, and correct me if I misspeak, Brandon, we believe there are other companies with the same issue, but it's this part of confusion that people generally check for people that are shipping to them. And we've dealt with this with pharmacies using services that are intermediaries to share drugs between different pharmacies, even in other states. They generally think I have to be licensed where I'm shipping to, or anybody that's shipping to me. But if I'm shipping to another pharmacy in another state, they have to be licensed there, not here. If I'm shipping to a wholesaler in another state, they have to be licensed there, but not here. But with reverse distribution, there's a specific carve out that it includes reverse distribution requiring an Arkansas permit, as many states do, because of the intricacies of the interaction of taking drugs back. So it's something I think most pharmacies are well versed in the fact that they have to check to see anyone they are receiving from has a permit with us. But we have an educational gap where they haven't realized that anyone they're sending drugs to in reverse distribution specifically also has to have a permit.
Well, this is distribution.
It's reverse distribution.
Reverse
If it was plain distribution to another state, that other company would not be required to have a permit with us.
Well, if I could just add, no, I'm not making excuses for the lack of not having a permit in the state. But having dealt with reverse distribution, one thing I would point out is the volume of it has grown for me in the last 5 years for a couple of reasons. One, I used to take my controls to the health department, and that changed. And the other thing is there's a lot more short dated product on the market now than there used to be. So the volume that I do with a reverse distributor now compared to 15 years ago is a whole lot more. The other thing is for pharmacies, you're really looking at reverse distribution as a service. And I think that creates some confusion on a pharmacy side too, where you're looking at it as a service and you're not thinking of it as wholesale distribution. And I don't think that that's because pharmacies are not being diligent. I just think it's a little bit of a confusing area to think about in that terms. One thing you do make sure is that they have their DEA registration.
Yes, to be able to receive from you.
Correct. And so once you have that DEA, because they have to give me a 222 form and all that good stuff, you feel confident that things are on the up and up. But I think the state licensure issue is just a little bit confusing from that standpoint.
And Dr. Jolly, I will say they provide a very nice little packet to each pharmacy that they do a service for that includes, this is our DEA license, maintain a copy of this with your record.
Mm.
They do provide that to each pharmacy when they conduct a return.
And I'd say the third thing is, and I don't know what your business model is, but the way reverse distribution happens is you get a percentage of the credits that are returned or that typically. So there's no cash exchange like there is with a typical wholesaler where I get an invoice and have to then turn that around in 15 days. So it's just a different model that I think is a little bit confusing for folks.
But we've had manufacturers in the state that when they ship to other states, whoever they ship to in other states does not have to have a permit here because a wholesale transaction that's not reverse distribution. But if it was from pharmacy reverse distribution transaction, because oftentimes the reverse distributors will come in and they have paperwork, they may come in and help you process on site. That's why we had the requirement for that license, but it's not something that I've held out in law class or anything else of, hey, here's this weird little piece of idiotic nuance that if you're sending to another state and it's reverse distribution, they have to have a license here.
Mm-hmm.
It's you have to have a license where you're shipping to is the point that we usually make for our student farms.
Yeah.
We can solve that.
I just had to do Reg 10.
Yeah.
I didn't know if the 3PLs had to have a wholesale until
Jobbers, brokers, 3PLs.
yeah. So that's how I found out, was preparing a lecture for the college and having to read through that. So
yeah. But it's another piece of, I say it's idiosyncrasies that I talk about with our law that you get way down into the specific details before you have to deal with a 3PL or a jobber or a broker.
Yeah.
Like those are very, very specific aspects of wholesale distribution of that.
Yep.
Well, one thing that concerns me a little bit is that we kind of be choking on some things and not so much on others. For example, we make a big deal that you cannot distribute legend drugs to a long-term care facility. And that we define what's an emergency kit and that those drugs belong to you. So we've highlighted, but yet clearly, if you were going to expect who would have access to drugs and they're treating patients, if it's okay to not know that they're licensed as wholesalers and they let them come in your pharmacy and you just turn over a few hundred bottles to them with no verification that they have the authority to do so, but yet we make such a big deal about emergency kits and ownership in a nursing home. I fail to understand the reconciliation of those two scenarios and why one's important and the other's not.
I don't think anybody said it's not important. I think if I had to differentiate, I would say I can see what's going on in my pharmacy and verify that they have a DEA number to come in there or employed. But when I send my drugs to a nursing home, I lose all oversight of them and I'm having to completely trust someone else. Some states don't have, a bright line delineation of what you can and can't put in a nursing home. We did that because if you have limited control, we were making it emergency use only. But I mean, we have companies that come in and do, they will do for tax purposes, counts and audits throughout a pharmacy. And in my experience, I've seen people that would even hire them to do counts of the drugs. It's not preparing drugs for prescription, so they don't necessarily have to be a technician or a pharmacist or anything else. I don't like that model, but it is unfortunately, or however it works out, it's legal for them to have those auditing companies come in. I mean, we've had people impersonate HVAC employees and divert from pharmacies where sometimes you have to let somebody that's not an employee in the pharmacy to work on something, but it's a mess. But I don't think it's in any way from the staff perspective saying one is more or less important than the other. I think there is a delineation in, I think people better understand one than the other. And we've identified an educational gap that maybe we can have incorporated in our law classes and in other lectures that we do from the Board of Pharmacy.
Well, I think my concern is it happened in Alabama and that wasn't enough to steer you to get somebody to come check your facility out. And even if it's a nuanced law here, that's his entire business.
Yeah.
So
I know.
I believe he and his company should understand every state. So that to me is, you already had your one strike, I guess, with Alabama and didn't fix it. And then why is that non-disciplinary? That was hard for me because I feel like that's your responsibility to understand the law. But I'm happy that you at least hired somebody really good to come in and look at your whole entire program, because they'll find possibly even other things, not necessarily states, but other things you need to do. But I do understand a company having this individual that you thought they understood it, but the licensing procedure is so complex. It would be really hard for some poor individual to kind of learn on the job and do it.
And that's, frankly, that's what we've discovered. And Real Solutions Group has been instrumental in guiding us in the way that we need to go. And I assure you that we take this very seriously. And again, we're leaning on Real Solutions now to guide us. We're in addition to having a new internal compliance officer, she now is working directly with Real Solutions. I mean, we spent a lot of time and frankly a lot of money with them, guiding us in the way that we need to go. And I'm very pleased so far with what they've done for us.
Perhaps I've made assumptions that aren't appropriate. Could you tell us a little more about your company, its size, location, gross annual revenues, number of employees, and so forth? I'd like to get a better feeling for what Return Solutions is.
Yeah, so I started the company we incorporated in May of '93. Initially, it was just me, and back then there was, as John was saying, that licensing for reverse distributors was non-existent. It wasn't a thing. It was a new industry. In fact, when we got licensed with the DEA didn't know what to do with us. We were a wholesaler. For a decade, we were licensed as a wholesaler, not a reverse distributor. And then finally, the DEA recognized, hey, there's a new category here. It's reverse distribution. And our license was changed from wholesaler to reverse distributor. In terms of the scope of the company, we're in all 50 states. Gross revenue is about $8 million, something like that. I'm sorry, what else did we have in the building in-house? I think roughly 35, and then service reps who actually go into pharmacies. We have, I think, 16 or 17 of those.
Are you only focused on reverse distribution, or do you do things like drug recalls and?
No, just reverse distribution. Okay.
Have you for Real Solutions, I know you just engaged them since this had come up. Do you have an ongoing contract with them to help with your regulatory issues?
We don't have a legal signed contract with them, but we have, we're in touch with them every day.
Yeah, and which I think is more typical for the way that they actually work with their consultants. I know.
Do you guys have to interact with the EPA as well?
We do.
I thought you had other governmental agencies you had to.
We do.
I know the colleagues from Real Solutions that we worked with on this, one of them has been a board member and executive director of a board of pharmacy that we all know. Another one has been previously an inspector, investigator with a board of pharmacy, and then has worked at the national level with other organizations on quality. So I think when that phone call was made, you find the people that understand it and can explain it and fix it as a consultant. I mean, if you guys want us to bring in all the pharmacies that used them, that's a different issue, but I didn't think that was a point the board was trying to make at this point, other than going back and educating what, I missed in law class on this, and that we'll try to help educate folks on.
That's not my point.
Yeah.
My point is that when we have an applicant that has had a problem, or whether with us or somebody else that we've identified as a part of the application process, I'm assuming that comes back to us for an ultimate look at the situation.
Well, oftentimes what the board has given staff direction for in the past, if we find a company that should have had a permit and had minimal transactions, what we would do is a consent agreement in a non-disciplinary fashion, like you guys accepted yesterday, where there would be usually a $2,500, paperwork fee in addition to the normal application for us to process that license once we see it's a minimal amount. If we deal with a company that refuses to be responsive to a subpoena or have a discussion with us, we will not process that application, and we would generally try to bring them in for a hearing. This one was a larger amount of shipment than what staff thought we could reach a normal agreement with, seeing the previous action, everything else. And so we brought them in, have had several discussions back and forth with them, and their approach of what they're willing to offer seemed to me, even as the director, to be a reasonable approach of corrective action, knowing the other measures they had taken.
Well, again, as reflected by my vote, I'm all right with that. What I'm concerned about is the application process. Here, like with the pharmacy techs that have had a sealed marijuana conviction as a teenager, that comes for us to look at.
We would not have a sealed marijuana conviction.
I understand that. I understand.
Come before the board.
But what we have here is we have a comparable violation in Alabama, and we have a violation here that matches that. And it just seems to me that ought to be the kind of thing that we come back and take a look at. That I'm not suggesting we see all of these applications at all.
Had a lot, they knew they had a license, they didn't realize it had lapsed. They did correct, paid a fine for it, got it reapplied. Viewpoint, they came, well, they were supposed to have something to do with that. That application hired counsel for compliance to try to correct that.
I would have thought that having the Alabama problem would have triggered looking to see what other states is there a problem in.
Exactly. And
I
it would
agree
be
with
the
that.
same as me just going across to Tennessee and saying, well, I got a licensed practice pharmacy. I don't know whether you require it in your laws or not, but I'm just going to go to Tennessee or Mississippi or wherever and ply my trade without determining whether I have to be properly licensed or not. My point regarding the pharmacies and them being aware is that for every bottle, or at least for every pharmacy that services were provided to, in addition to the reverse distributor knowing or should have known that they required licensure, that the pharmacy should have been at least aware that you just don't turn your drugs over to somebody without proper licensure. I'm not saying we go out and go after them. I'm saying that I mean, this seems a little bit like a pass. I mean, it's 75 cents a bottle. That's not much of a fine. But we need to at least make pharmacies aware that reverse distribution requires proper licensure before you relinquish control of controls or legend drugs.
And that's part of the reason why our inspection investigative staff is asking that on inspection and educating on it firsthand in the pharmacy. Like it was missed in school. It's not something that has come up for us to put in law reviews previously. The best way we at this point can educate on it is firsthand in the store where those reverse distribution decisions would be made.
Well, and just for the record, it is in the law lecture at Harding.
Now,
No, it has.
no, I mean, it is now. I'm saying, Dr. Jolly, we graduated together. You ever hear this in school?
No.
I mean, I can't speak for Harding or its law class. I'm just telling you that the pharmacists that are mainly out running pharmacies, I don't believe this was in their law education.
And all I'm saying is that while I appreciate that the inspectors are educating pharmacies while they're out there, that now that we recognize that this is a bigger issue, that if nothing else, we put something on the website.
Yeah, we could ask them to put in a,
Pharmacist Q&A.
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's one of those things, talking to Benson, they're usually looking for what they're going to put in a Friday blast or something like that. We could ask for it to be in there as well.
So John, sorry.
Oh, I'll just not to beat a dead horse, but just one final point that I'll make at the sharp end of it, at the pharmacy standpoint, is their goal is not to circulate drug for human consumption.
No.
It's to get it out of circulation
It's
so that it
destruction.
doesn't get thrown in landfills and it doesn't get set down sinks, which is ultimately protecting the public health. Okay. So I do think there is a difference between this and a 503B that was shipping the sterile product into the state that did not have a license. I do think there's a differentiation.
I do too.
So John, I think what Harold might feel comfortable knowing, y'all examine every single application. You determine if you're gonna give it or not. Most of them, if we don't see them, it's probably because y'all decided not to even give them the application. But I know y'all have brought some, when you have a question, if you should or shouldn't, you have brought them before the board.
Yes.
And I just wonder, I think this would help answer his question. If we hadn't had the Arkansas issue also, and you just had the Alabama issue because that was reported, probably what
So
y'all have given them a license or come here.
our board has generally not had any type of automatic sister state action is the thing we
Absolutely.
look at. They disclosed, like they told us, once they figured out they had to have a permit here and they submitted the application, they were absolutely forthright in saying, yes, we have had this. It's here in the application that they had this issue in Alabama. We can look at Alabama. We have seen, how they at times deal with different issues or sister state actions, which is
Right.
different than ours. Not a denigrating comment. They just handle things differently. Their violation in Alabama in and of itself would not be something that I think that we would generally say, well, you can't have a permit until you come to Arkansas because they let a license lapse.
Okay.
The way we would handle it in Arkansas would have been different than the way it was handled in Alabama, as far as the amount of money or fines or anything else. We just have a different procedure and that's
Right.
fine. They can have theirs, we have ours. In general, if we have someone that is applying for a permit and has an outstanding issue with us, if we resolve that issue with us, then it would resolve the outstanding issue for the application. If the board doesn't want staff to handle that way, we just need instructions otherwise.
Personally, I like how y'all handle it, and I know y'all are even and fair and look at everybody the same and in their own detail. I just thought if Harold knew that, when y'all do have questions, you do bring it before the board.
Yes.
You just typically, it's not a lot of them.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that. What we're doing now in discussing this with the applicant is what I was hoping for as a part of the coming back.
Yeah.
But let me go to a more broad issue. I understand that we don't take action necessarily based on an action of a sister state. But is a sister state action not sufficient to send an application here to the board, at least for information purposes in the process?
That's up to how you want to instruct staff. If there are many sister state actions that based on either the time that passed or the specifics of it, that generally staff would sign off on. I find that in my few years here at the board, generally as the board has seen different issues, they go, next time, let staff handle that. And that's the way that we're operating. And it's the problem is that if you're a new board member, you necessarily don't have that institutional memory of signing to staff, but we can absolutely revisit. So on this specific case, generally, if a pharmacy that wanted to ship into Arkansas had let a license lapse some years ago and got in trouble in their home state for it, I don't know that that would necessarily mean that they, after they fix that issue in the home state, would prevent them from getting a permit here. We've had that with technicians, we've had that with pharmacists, both humans and businesses. If there was a major set of med errors at a pharmacy that had gotten in trouble, or a compounding issue that was a specific, something specific that affected patients, you're going to see it. If you have a diversion issue by a professional or an impairment issue by a professional, you're going to see it. But when it was a paperwork licensure issue that they resolved, that usually would not rise to an automatic board appearance.
Well, I think as I've listened to you talk and I've thought about that, I think that I have confused myself to an extent by my teenage shoplifter expunged record example, because that, after all, is a criminal matter.
It is.
Where the things that you're talking about here are not.
They're civil.
They're procedural, administrative type matters. So I'm fine. I'm fine.
And to your point, the juvenile issue is a whole different issue because we don't look at juvenile. But when we have criminal issues on pharmacists, interns, or technicians, we have specific criminal background check law that we have to follow, even to the point of the original examples in those laws were hot checks. And some people go, well, how does a hot check relate to, a pharmacy permit? And said, well, the legislature assigned that at that time, and they saw hot checks as theft or fraud, misrepresentation.
So one last thing. So, if I totally understand that Alabama is a different scenario and y'all would have issued the license. If his error in Arkansas had been smaller, not to such a large degree,
we would have done a consent agreement per board policy. It would have been $2,500.
but then it was so much, you had to bring it to the board, but then y'all kind of made an agreement before you walked in. Is that?
We talked about what we thought would be reasonable. We don't necessarily have the ability to negotiate, but having watched for many years board informal conferences, looking at the shipments and everything else, I personally thought, and I think that other staff would agree, in the different numbers, if you were to say, if he were to come in and say a third of that amount, I think he'd have gotten some cross looks from the staff. I think if he'd have said half that amount, part of the staff would have been like, well, whatever. And part of the staff would have given you some cross looks. That's a significant amount of money.
Yeah. And I think the fine was right. I'm just thinking the discipline is a little questionable, whether you call it discipline or not. And we had to talk.
Well, I think that the actions after notice
Right.
help show the way a company is either acting in good faith or bad faith. If they would have refused initially to even respond to our subpoena, completely different issue. Staff recommendation would have been disciplinary action. In some ways, and I'm being completely forthright, we should have sent them a subpoena and a cease order simultaneously. So there would have been no further shipment or notification, Because for them, if they aren't aware of the rule and we don't send them a cease order, it's not immediately apparent, but they did respond very quickly with the application, as you can see. And so internally, it's, all right, guys, next time we do this and we know that they're doing it, we're going to send the subpoena and the cease order, because not everybody realizes that that's the reason you're getting a subpoena. As soon as that was brought to their attention, they did stop shipping, even though it was after the original subpoena, and engaged with a professional company with a large amount of expertise who then started reaching out to us.
Well, I do agree, them hiring Real Solutions is a
It's a smart idea.
very good game changer.
Real Solutions handle everything across all 50 states. Were you now in compliance? So kind of, because it seems like there's a little bit of a pattern of like asking for forgiveness rather than permission. Maybe is that what they're like reversing a little bit?
Yes, I mean, we're being extremely proactive now. And the person that has taken over compliance for us is simply a liaison for us and Real Solutions. Real Solutions is our compliance now.
And you've delineated compliance with permits, licenses, et cetera, from compliance with hazardous waste and all of that. Did I hear
I'm
that
sorry.
correctly? Like there's two different types of compliance that
Correct.
you're.
Yes,
You have your EPA and you have your licensure.
correct.
So he probably has a request if it's okay, if he can be approved for his application.
Do you need a motion on that?
It'd be nice.
I would so move, provided that the approval is subject to a continuing formal relationship with the company that's assisting.
With Real Solutions.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I'll second that motion. That was your motion? Okay, I will second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes.
So you're bringing two checks? You got one for your application?
We gave us that.
Oh, okay.
So we'll get it all reduced to writing and for the agreement, and Ashley will send that to you guys.
Okay.
We'll be back in touch. Very good. All right. Thank you for coming.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you all very much.
Mike Malone.
Dr. Curley, do we?
Okay, so I have some update about our agenda. And you can be excused and I'll meet you out there.
Okay.
So at 1:00, we had Mike Malone for a hearing. And I've gotten word, his attorney actually came up here and spoke with Dr. McCready. So Dr. Malone had a home invasion this morning. And the police department are there at his home and they're interviewing him, so he is not able to make it to this hearing. And his attorney has requested that we move it to the next board meeting. So I'll make that motion, I guess, on his behalf, since he's not able to be here due to this unforeseen home invasion. So that would be our 1:00 hearing.
Do you think we could call, excuse me, do you think we could call Powers and ask them to?
I can try, yes, ma'am.
Them at Warren?
We can try to reach out. It may be easier for some of the later ones in the day.
Some later when.
If we
Yeah.
can get any of them here earlier in the day, we'll move them up in the schedule.
Right, I would say start there and move. see if we can
Yeah,
move
I'll
everybody
try.
We
up.
get off the end of the day,
Okay.
it'll probably help us as much as anything.
Okay.
So our hearing officer's coming back at
We're looking at the
1:30.
time now.
So we'll see if we can get anybody here at 1:30 to take some time up before 2:00.
Sounds good.
Any,
Okay,
So we're technically,
we got a big. open slide
any
down.
topic discussions, anything that anybody has?
I'd just like to say, I
right, both
appreciate
y'all talk.
the board, working to educate people and like that extra bit of information on reverse distributors, bringing that up is very helpful. Because again, I don't think it's something that a lot of folks probably think about.
I'll tell you, I mean, I've been here a long time and have read through and changed rules and updated them, and it was not in my mind of both Arkansas and the other permit for the reverse distributors. Most people, the thought process is DEA. And so it showed me, I'm like, this is, I talk about idiocy and idiosyncrasies of laws, like, you don't have to do an exact count on 3, 4s, or 5s, but I think you're an idiot if you don't. I would tell you should do an exact count, but if you're answering the legal question, it's just one of those things, on next review, it's absolutely like, this is one of the things, and you have to know, even for reverse distributors, this applies. It's a fascinating thing because there aren't very many companies that do that. And we started getting questions. And so Dr. Holland starts asking like, hey, who's your reverse distributor? And how many companies are really doing that? Like 4?
Most common.
Yeah. Yeah. There's really about 5 companies that we commonly see with that.
But it just seems intuitive that legend.
We're still in a meeting.
Okay. It just seems intuitive that Legend Drugs can't be in the control of just anybody.
But if you are shipping to another state, they don't have to have a permit here, except for reverse distribution. That it's the one wonky thing. So if you are a pharmacy and you have a facility that you've got a medication that's in short supply, so hospital has a medication, we've got plenty of it, and Le Bonheur in Memphis or St. Jude's needs it, you can ship it to them if you have the legal authority to ship to Tennessee, but they do not have to have an Arkansas license for you to ship to them. On the
Well, you're
wholesale
talking
level.
about something like Match RX or something, right?
No, well, I'm talking about a wholesale distribution. Any type of business to business distribution, you have to make sure, Match RX, if I'm going to ship to Arizona is a good example. Arizona says that as a pharmacy, even if I go through something like that, I can't ship into Arizona unless I have a permit with Arizona. Louisiana has rules like that. But we don't say that the pharmacy in Arizona that wants to receive something from here with Match RX, that Arizona pharmacy doesn't have to have a permit with us because they're receiving a wholesale transaction from Arkansas.
But aren't these folks, they're in the pharmacy. They're taking control of the drugs right there.
Not all of them.
Not all of them.
A lot of them are just an online tool you scan and then it creates an invoice, sell it by invoice to this first distributor. It's all done by your staff.
So some does.
Some do, ours do.
Yeah.
Okay.
So-
So
And I don't know in this company, yeah.
They actually don't take possession of. Walks up and give them money to go to.
And they ship them. They help you ship them.
They help you ship them, but they actually go to.
Which
Yeah.
maybe were.
Yeah, they have a
mean,
direct
really.
contract for direct shipment on the twos.
The current solution, it's not physically located in our.
Yes,
Out of state.
yes.
Couldn't be usually.
If they were physically in Arkansas, they would have to have a permit to operate within Arkansas. And here's where this gets weird, Harold. We would generally say, if someone is wanting to ship to that facility here from another state, they have to have a permit in order to ship into Arkansas. This one's weird because some states have the rule that on reverse distribution, that if they were located here in Arkansas and pulling meds from Alabama, they have to have a permit in Alabama as well to receive those meds from Alabama, or to whether they're going in the store or not. That's academic at that point. They don't split that in the rule, but it's just this weird little area of practice that is different than the other wholesale transactional law.
Thank you.
I think when things are disciplined or not, it gets very cloudy because when a pharmacist makes an error or even bad errors and they're a human and they didn't intend to do that, that's easy to say. They've learned their lesson, they've done some CE, they are trying to do better. It's pretty easy to say non-disciplined, but when companies, and I'm not talking about just this company, but when companies don't do what they need to do to understand their business, it becomes very questionable whether it's discipline or not, just so they won't get other states to do the pile on sister thing, which is, I don't like either.
You have companies that come into you and show you all the investment they've made to fix a problem and prevent it. And if we're going to make it meaningful, that's the biggest thing we can do is, be sure you've cured it, researched it, and fix it from happening again, whether here or somewhere else. We have other companies that are like, that's not a problem, or that ignore us.
Right. So that's why there comes the discussion, and that's why that is harder to work through to the end.
Well, we've had companies coming before us before, and I mean, some of you that were on the board at the time would remember that said, I mean, we knew we needed a permit, but we just kept doing business. Right. And they were quite flippant about it until we discovered it and shut it down. And then they got upset that they had a much larger penalty than that. I think $50,000 or $100,000 or something like that. But it's you knowingly had reckless behavior that you were warned about, that people alerted you to, and you chose not to do it. It's different than, look, this situation is like we're paying someone we thought knew how to do this, and then we found out they didn't know how to do this. So they're not doing that anymore. And we've hired, we asked around and figured out who the experts were, and we hired them.
Or you have to send them 3 certified letters and they may respond after, I've seen some where it seems like it's taken a year to 18 months to even get them
Responsive.
responsive.
It's like you guys asked us about, semaglutide. I am sure there are companies that are not permitted to ship into Arkansas that are shipping to Arkansas. And if we find those companies, we will send subpoenas, send cease and desist. If we find out that they are still shipping, then we will have hearings, may continue to court action. It is complicated very quickly if someone is not responsive.
So on that topic, if, I don't know where the doctor is, I'm just making this up, but if there's a doctor here or a nurse or an APN or a med spa or whatever, if they're accepting it and giving it to the patient,
their own board should take action or could take action on them for obtaining prescription drugs from unlicensed sources.
but if they were shipping it into Arkansas, that's when we're gonna come into play.
If we find out, we would say you must be legally permitted to ship into Arkansas, send a subpoena, a cease order, and start a case.
And that's to ship to anybody that would be,
Their
have the
home or
authority
the
to
med
receive
clinic.
wholesaler shipments, like a,
Wholesale or prescription, either one.
But if that patient receives it at their home, they should still be licensed to send
It
it
should
to
be
their
licensed as a
home.
pharmacy at that point, for sure.
I think we're gonna run across.
It's gonna
some of
happen.
that.
Yeah.
We don't know of
And,
it.
and I actually think some of it's going to happen because the attorneys that are finding cases of where patients have been harmed and they're being harmed by potential products that didn't even arrive in the state legally. I mean, Harold and I could talk about liability insurance all day long, but if you're obtaining from illegal sources and patients are harmed, I mean, it's malpractice. It's plain and simple.
Could I change the subject just a second since we're just asking general
We
questions?
wish you would.
I am curious what the parameters for a pharmacist refusing to fill a legally issued prescription in Arkansas is.
Well, with the conscience clause from the 70s, any healthcare professional could refuse to take part in any type of birth control or abortifacient procedure based on their morals or opinions. Under the more recent, all healthcare providers have the ability to conscientiously object to any service, filling a prescription, treating a patient. I mean, there's some exceptions for like emergency care in an emergency room. And then on controlled substances specifically, not only would the state law back a pharmacist in their ability to refuse to fill a prescription, there's federal law that requires rule regulation that pharmacists have a corresponding responsibility to consider for every controlled substance prescription that they fill, that has to be for what they believe to be a legitimate medical reason in the usual course of practice. So if you look at DEA regulation on controls, it's two levels, both the state and the federal. It's an interesting conversation I've had to have with different prescribers, medical board before in conferences. And I think the part that people miss is there's not a requirement in any state that I'm aware of that says a pharmacist shall fill every legal prescription that comes in. And so with that, it's pharmacists can at times refuse it for financial reasons. They can refuse it for moral or conscientious objection. There are times when pharmacists refuse to fill prescriptions because I only have enough of this product to take care of the established patients I have. We saw a lot of that with specifically hydroxychloroquine. We were getting the calls of people mad at pharmacies that wouldn't fill them. And we were getting calls from patients that were scared their pharmacy was going to run out and they were going to have a potential relapse of lupus or another autoimmune disorder. So there's a conscience clause, and I can pull the law for you, Harold, and give it to you.
I think this is where my concern starts to overlap with malpractice. You're familiar with the Rose City drug case?
Kowalski.
Yeah, and in that case, the Supreme Court basically said that the pharmacist had no legal responsibility to challenge the necessity or efficacy or whatever of the prescription.
They did not have a duty to warn of the potential adverse effects of medication that was prescribed and dispensed.
And I guess I'll start with that then. Do you think that means that that doesn't extend to more than to a refusal to dispense in addition to warn?
That case was unusual because the lawsuit was specifically, my understanding, based on the fact that the pharmacy did dispense and then the patient passed. So it's kind of unusual. If the pharmacy would have refused to have filled that prescription, there wouldn't have been from that pharmacy's medications of potential death or a lawsuit from that aspect. So in some ways, it almost appeared that lawsuit was alleging that the pharmacist not only could, but had a duty to refuse to fill or to warn the patient.
Right, exactly.
And what the Supreme Court said was, no, they don't.
Right.
Now, we have specific rule in place, as we have since the early 90s, that pharmacists are required to counsel patients on new prescriptions. Most of us with that training would say that would include what the medication is, how it's to be used, potential side effects, things to look out for. So we would generally say you have a duty to counsel the patient. The way I take the Supreme Court, it's a secondary duty. The primary responsibility for that is the prescriber has an absolute specific duty to warn the patient of potential effects or ill effects of their medication.
Yeah, it just seems to me that as we're expanding the abilities of pharmacists, which are happening all the time, whether by statewide protocols or not, that's going to change the potential liability of pharmacists with regard to what they do or don't do.
Well, and your point is well taken, because when you become the prescriber, that Supreme Court decision basically puts it squarely in your lap that as the prescriber, you now have the sole responsibility to do that.
But I think it's beyond that. It's the extent to which the protocol, complying with the protocol, provides you with a defense or not.
I agree.
Because the standard of care is not a fixed sole standard of care. That can vary with different circumstances.
Didn't that rely heavily on learned intermediary and kind of overlook the fact that drug utilization review responsibility?
The Kowalski case,
Yeah, the Rose
I-
Drug Authority, no.
I think part of it did. So I'd have to go back and re-research it because, you know, there was a whole lot of information in that case that I think salient to it, but when you got down to the decision itself, it was fairly specific.
Failure to warn, right?
Of course, today it would have been much more highlighted because it involved opiates, benzodiazepines,
Yes.
Ambien, muscle relaxant. I think carisoprodol was involved. So, I
Well,
mean, it was that whole cocktail of,
then you wound up with prescribers in jail over, you know, over the cases like that in that area.
and today the DEA is, well, the arguments in these cases, the national opioid litigation is that the cases are being said, you have a corresponding responsibility, and part of your corresponding responsibility would be if you're looking at combinations of drugs and doses and escalation, duplicate therapy, those are drug utilization review issues. And so therefore DUR helps to fulfill your corresponding responsibility.
You're right. Better have a pharmacist doing it.
So where do we, I guess the law of the land in Arkansas is that we don't have a duty to warn, but how does case law reconcile with regulatory law?
You still have a duty to counsel. Yeah, the way.
Which is not totally warning.
Well, and that's the issue. I think that there is some separation. I'm not an attorney, but having looked at this for a long time, in that case, when you really got to the case, the problem was the prescriber did not warn. The real case was the prescriber didn't warn, and they said the pharmacy didn't warn, and the pharmacy said we counseled on it. Given we didn't say, hey, your doctor's got you on so much stuff, you're likely to die. And what they were saying was that physician should have counseled the patient about the risk of the opioid because it did kill them, or the combination therapy. That's all we got before lunch. We'll try to see if we can get anybody here for 1:30. We need to go make some phone calls. Y'all good till hopefully 1:30? All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.